This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Man, it's hot and heavy, but the summertime hasn't kicked in just yet. But a lot of basketball is happening right now. NBA playoff basketball with some amazing plays, some really gut-wrenching losses for some teams, and really some awe-shockers, man. So it's all good in our NBA world. How's it in yours? Let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man. www.shawsports.net is where you can find him. My brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Overall impressions over the last 5 days of the NBA playoffs.
Some teams aren't as good as we thought they were, and some teams are just playing at another level right now in the NBA playoffs, and that's what you'd expect. So, yeah, that's my impressions. Overall, we'll dive into some other conversations about the 2018 NBA playoffs, which I think have been pretty interesting overall, even if, we're heading towards some sweeps in a couple of these series. Nevertheless, great basketball as always, and salute to you and all the fans listeners of NBA Baseline.
Most definitely, man. We have a great show on tap, breakdown conversation. We continue with our series of the Autopsy reports. We delve into the New York Knicks, what their future beholds, hiring a new head coach, and will this mean a new era, a new culture yet again for Knicks basketball? Also, the Phoenix Suns hiring a new head coach, first come, first serve. And they obviously decided to go first in NBA history with their hire. We'll talk a little bit about that and what their future beholds. And then we also have our subject on the drop. Probably be fitting considering what we're talking about with the NBA playoffs, playoff mentality. Who has that Mamba mentality? I know that there's some teams in the NBA that are carrying it right now, and that there's some that we think don't. So it's only fitting that we do decide to have this kind of conversation. And I'm pretty sure that there's a team that we will be discussing in the throes of that subject matter, playoff mentality. So great show on tap. And once again, we always encourage everybody to jump on board with the Baseline fam. Get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. All we ask you to do is download the platform, lock into the Baseline NBA podcast, allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. You know how we do, and you know how we roll. Time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And as always, in the breakdown, as we do our thing through the course of the NBA playoffs and the offseason, about that time for that autopsy report. Two more teams that we decide to put on the docket, that being the New York Knicks and the Phoenix Suns. So let's go ahead, Shaw, and start off with the first team being the New York Knicks. They obviously decided to kind of keep us in suspense, so to speak, through the course of the NBA playoffs, because Lord knows this is a process that you would not like to have lingering only a month maybe, or a couple of weeks as the NBA draft kicks in. But clearly, general manager Perry, basketball operations, Mills, they decide we need to pull the trigger. We need a new head coach. We need to start rebuilding the culture of what's supposed to be Knicks basketball. They decide to make the move for a team that finished 29-53. They go ahead and make the hire of getting David Fizdale. I first want to get your thoughts about this, Shaw, as far as their overall process of going through and delineating and figuring out that at the end of the day, David Fizdale is the best fit for this team.
They went and interviewed, 7 to 10 guys somewhere in that neighborhood. I know David Blatt was mentioned. Mike Brown got an interview. Coach Bud ended up becoming available. I don't think he interviewed for that job specifically. Clifford Vogel. Like, again, they went all over the gamut. But Fizdale, I think, was probably the guy that they wanted, all along, being one of the premier guys to get fired this past season, in an unceremonious fashion, made him a very hot commodity on the open market when the coaching positions became available. From my standpoint, my biggest question was why he himself wanted to go to New York when other jobs might have been available, knowing what that organization has been traditionally. However, this is a guy who carries a large name as a coach, so he can go into that market and in that city and speak freely. And I hope the Knicks organization are ready for that, because he's not going to hold back. He's not going to be timid and, just say, okay, the organization is doing everything fine, if they're not. He's an outspoken guy. He speaks out on social issues. I think Fizdale in New York, it might be the change the Knicks need for themselves, although I did question why he did it for himself in terms of David Fizdale.
Well, let's go ahead and break this down in two parts, Shaw. And I know we still have to kind of go through the rest of the New York Knicks as a team moving forward, what the expectations should be as they kick into this offseason. But with David Fizdale, you bring up an interesting point about maybe this is not so much about the New York Knicks and their process of changing or turning the corner, given the stench that happened with their experience with Phil Jackson, but more so about where does this play for David Fizdale? Because I will kind of agree with you, Shaw, and not even talking about David Fizdale, the personality, the mouthpiece, where he does speak on a lot of things and isn't afraid to hold back. I'm looking at this from a developmental standpoint, because I see David Fizdale as one of those kind of guys who really isn't going to start playing second fiddle to a international superstar, aka a Kristaps Porzingis, aka the unicorn, the one I call KRS-One. Let's not forget, Fizdale's experience with Marc Gasol. And so I just find it interesting that are we seeing the corner really change for the New York Knicks? And is it within David Fizdale's power to check players who are being touted as superstar talents for a basketball team that you don't know who's running the asylum at times? And even though David Fizdale is a powerful voice, a powerful figure, is his temperament built on calming down guys that might actually overshadow the hype of being part of the New York Knicks basketball team?
Well, I think with Kristaps specifically, it's hard to do that right now. Although he had a phenomenal year, he was injured. And yes, he's the future face of the franchise, or is the current face of the franchise, so to speak. But I think he's still young and still impressionable in a lot of ways. And yeah, he wants to be the man, but I don't think it's above being coachable. He hasn't been happy with what the Knicks have done. At least that's what all reports are saying, previous to this, and how they handled the Phil Jackson situation and Hornacek and, Carmelo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a new day. So I think Kristaps, and the other thing too, he's not even going to be 100% healthy to begin the year. Very, very slim chance he begins the year, more looking like a January, February start for him next season anyway. So Fizdale will have the opportunity to go there and kind of control the team. All reports are as well too that Fizdale's already flown over to Latvia to go see Kristaps, while he's doing his rehab over the summer to establish a relationship and establish some rapport. So I think that part of it is going to be, okay, at least you'd hope so. Although an interesting report did come out over the course of the week too, in terms of Fizdale leaving Memphis, some altercation that he had with Gasol. And Gasol was like, oh, I want to coach like Popovich. And then Fizdale fired back, said, well, I want LeBron James on my team. So he's not afraid to go and give it to you if you're going to come after him. But Porzingis doesn't strike me as the type of guy that's as outspoken as Gasol is, especially just not having the amount of years and not having really accomplished anything in the couple years he's been in the NBA.
But we've also seen scenarios, Shaw, where even when head coaches head coaches with the kind of mantra maybe that David Fizdale has, and he has clout. Right? There's no question. David Fizdale has clout. You're coming from the Pat Riley tree, you know what I'm saying? From the Pat Riley family. I don't want to use the word crime family, but you come from the Pat Riley familia, right? You got clout. You got credibility. And so this still becomes to me a game of faces. So David Fizdale goes to Latvia. He visits Kristaps. We'd like to think that Kristaps still holds the cards because he really is the quintessential superstar player for the New York Knicks. Like the fact that he's injured, the fact that the Knicks are still not a good basketball team, and you can only gauge that when he does come back. I just wonder, how does that filter out with David Fizdale's respect factor to the rest of the guys that have to get developed? The fact that you have a Tim Hardaway Jr., which everyone is still talking about how his contract, the Knicks overpaid for. I'm just saying that to me, there's a lot of moving pieces still with David Fizdale. And while he has the clout, it still worries me that we're still not talking about whether or not David Fizdale still is the right fit to develop other parts to what the New York Knicks are certainly going to need to be a competitive team in an already competitive division in the Atlantic.
Well, yeah, player development is something that I think he had a little bit to do with while he was in Miami. Them being the head coach in Memphis. That was more of a veteran-laden team that became kind of awestruck, with you will, with or kind of struck with young guys because of injuries and things of that nature. I think he'll be okay, in that mode. And I think a lot of that is going to be on some of the other young guys he brings in, not young guys, the other coaches he brings in. I think he's smart as somebody he's looking to bring in onto his staff as well too. And a lot of those guys will take on the responsibility of trying to develop some of the younger players, Frank Ntilikina, Tim Hardaway Jr., even Trey Burke to some degree as well too. I think that's not something necessarily that they're worried about right now. We will be interested to see what they do in the draft. Lottery's coming up pretty soon. Their odds have them somewhere between like maybe 7 and 9 in terms of making a pick. And they can get an impactful player for them, hopefully for the future, in a pretty decent draft this year. So I think Fizdale, in terms of the player development, should be okay. And I think this is a team that's trying to at least scrape the playoffs, at least sniff it, get in there at a 7 or 8 seed in the next upcoming season. Not necessarily, maybe not next season, because Porzingis is not going to be there for most of it. But again, I think they're going to have playoffs on their mind in a couple seasons.
All right, Justin, let's go ahead and talk about this New York Knicks team, right? This is a team that is really just, they're all over the map when you look at it's essentially where this team fits in the mold of the modern and the old NBA. Okay. I don't know if it says anything when Enes Kanter is almost essentially your best scorer, even though we know that really should be Kristaps Porzingis. You're, he's a valuable commodity, and really contributed for this basketball teams at times. I wonder, with David Fizdale and this system, where do guys like Enes Kanter fit in? Where do guys like Trey Burke fit in? You got to think that the New York Knicks want to keep him on board. If there's ever anybody that you can make another argument, if he had more games under his belt, I seriously would have put him in the hat for most improved player, given where he came from, right? Even though that's all Victor Oladipo. But you look at this Knicks team, and they got a lot of mixed parts with no cohesiveness centered near Kristaps Porzingis. What are we talking about for this team to start taking those steps that, like you're saying, should be putting themselves in a sniffing playoff scenario for next season?
Yeah, well, like I said, maybe not next season because Porzingis will miss a good portion of it. But I think, like you were alluding to a little bit earlier on, is about player development. So what do they do with that? What position do they go ahead and draft and really try to develop? Is it a power forward? Is it another swing man at that 2-3 type position? If they dropped another point guard, I think that'd be obviously very problematic, and I can't see them doing that. But one situation that they have to figure out is Joakim Noah. Stretch that guy, get him off your roster. Just don't go back into the season carrying that, whatever it is, $56 million.
So you're thinking they should buy him out?
They got to figure out something, and I know Dolan, because that's still the head of the snake, is opposed to doing that, but they've got to figure out some sort of a way, because Noah has no future there on that roster. Kanter is going to opt into his contract, so that's 18.6 that you're on the hook for. You don't want to be on the hook for 18.5 with Noah, who you're not going to play. So that is one of the things that they have to figure out. And again, unless Fizdale can talk to him and say, hey, come back next year and we'll find some sort of a role for you with Porzingis being out, and you could say that's maybe a possibility, because they traded Hernan Gomez, earlier in the season to Charlotte and gave up on him, which I didn't think that was
horrendous.
Smart.
That was absolutely horrendous.
But what's said was done is done. So now Fizdale is here as the coach. It has to fight and divvy out the playing time one way or the other. Ron Baker's going to opt in. Kyle Quinn could potentially opt into his 4.2. So there's, they don't have a whole lot of flexibility, but they're not completely stuck. They could probably re-sign Beasley again, and Beasley and Fizdale have a relationship from their Miami days as well. I think Fizdale is going to have a lot on his plate, but a lot of it's going to be what Scott Perry and company want to do in terms of giving him some better players to work with in the offseason. And I don't know where that is going to be from a free agent standpoint, obviously, and I don't know what they're going to do in the draft.
All right, so we're talking about a basketball team, Shaw, that averaged 104.5 points per game, which was 18th in the league. And then defensively, they allowed 108 points per game. If we're talking about a David Fizdale-led type team for this upcoming season, and you don't have Kristaps Porzingis, and to your point, Enes may opt in. You obviously still have Tim Hardaway Jr. What end of the basketball spectrum should this team look to vastly improve if they still keep the current roster, and regardless of what they get from the picks in the draft?
I don't know that they have an option to focus on one thing or the other. They're bad on both sides of the basketball, and I think Fizdale is going to recognize that. So he's got to put in some plays, that gets some guys some easier shot and puts them in a position to be successful. And he's got to just demand better effort from everybody defensively. The Knicks were doing okay for a little while. To begin the year, I feel like where they were when they were like hovering around 500 and everything was kind of all good. Then they fall off a cliff. But they had to, at least they were showing the potential to play some defense to begin the year. And I want to say they were a top 10 team, maybe for their first 15 games or something like that. I'm not looking back at it right now, but I feel like that much was true. So that was a very, very small sample size, and obviously they regressed. But there's something that can be made out of that. I think if Fizdale really wants to, and it might be with the lineup that he decides to play. You got to go out there and give me effort. And Ntilikina is an athletic. He's a long guy. Started off the year a little bit injured this past season. So if he's healthy, do they run him out there and be maybe a kind of a smaller two guard, and give Courtney Lee minutes? Obviously, Tim Hardaway's got to play. I think defensively is something that Fizdale's going to demand, but offense is something that they can't ignore either because, again, you have to score in today's NBA.
All right, final question before we start focusing our attention to the Phoenix Suns on the opposite side of our autopsy reports. Which of the guys do you really see has an opportunity to step up and shine for this upcoming season outside of Kristaps Porzingis? Could it be an Emmanuel Mudiay? Could we see Mike Beasley? I mean, of all the guys that you see on this roster who has the optimal level of opportunity to really put their face and their stamp on making a name for themselves for the New York Knicks, who is the likely person that you see getting that from David Fizdale?
I'm going to give a pseudo cop out kind of answer. I think Kyle O'Quinn is somebody, if he stays on the roster, I think Fizdale is going to love, just because of his toughness and his grit. And you could see Kyle O'Quinn having some sort of a, career year, so to speak. And not to say that the Knicks need to be riding on Kyle O'Quinn. I'm not crazy. But if you're asking me where, okay, who's going to probably buy in the most and the fastest to the system, I think it's going to be him. I have this sneaking suspicion that Mudiay is not going to be the type of guy that Fizdale loves, unless Mudiay drastically improves himself over the course of the summer. Maybe they have some conversations about what that's going to look like.
And I will also say this as well, too, Shaw, turning the ball over. If there's one thing that I definitely think that David Fizdale loathes is if you're not going to be a good team offensively, don't be a team that gives the opposition that many more opportunities to be better than you. So Mudiay is a turnover-prone type point guard, and he could easily lose his opportunities and minutes with the way that he gets reckless with the basketball. We saw that in the second half of the season for the period of time that he was playing with the New York Knicks, which is probably why, Hornacek had favored Trey Burke a lot more than I think at times favoring Mudiay. He spot minutes he put him in. It would be really interesting to see how David Fizdale works with Mudiay and how short of a leash he gives this kid.
Yeah, you're right. You're 100% correct there. So again, that point guard situation is a little bit muddied. And a lot of guys are going to be vying for time and wanting to get minutes. And then when you have Courtney Lee on the roster, for $24 million over the next 2 years, and obviously Tim Hardaway Jr., you can't just say, "Oh, I'll slide one of those guys to the two." As I was alluding to earlier, you can try to play Ntilikina, but that cuts into the minutes of Lee and then potentially Hardaway. And I feel like they want to continue to play and develop Hardaway as much as they can. So who knows? Maybe they move Lee. Still affordable deal. He was pretty productive last year. And did some nice things for them. So this roster has some flexibility, not a lot of sexy parts that everyone's going to be vying after, but maybe, rotation guy here and there that some people will be looking to fill out some of their teams with. It's a possibility, I think, with Scott Perry in that general management and that office.
All right. Well, there you have it. New York Knicks are a basketball team, only 29 wins this past season. Unsure and definitely depending upon how Mills, Perry, and Fizdale works with the roster for this offseason. Can we better gauge on whether or not there's going to be an improvement for this team, stagnation, or they may even actually take a step back knowing that their unicorn is not going to be fully ready by the time that the season starts. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our subject of the breakdown, autopsy reports, just finished bodying up the New York Knicks. So let's go ahead and unzip the Phoenix Suns, Shaw. I mean, look, the Phoenix Suns, we've been saying this for years, much like in the same sense that we talk about Dolan as the owner for the New York Knicks. The Sarver clan um, still has a stranglehold on the Knicks. I'm sorry, on the Phoenix Suns. And this is a basketball team that finished with 21 wins. And it's just hard to tell whether or not this is a team that's ever going to improve. But you look at the roster and they have young, talented basketball players, and you just can't understand why things still just don't click. Well, they've gone ahead and they've hired themselves another head coach. This time, this is the first European-born head coach in NBA history, in a former Utah assistant, Igor Kokosov. God, I said it right like 15 times before we recorded, and I can't get the guy's last name out properly. But when we talk about how the Phoenix Suns really need to figure out a way to move forward, especially with this young talent, it may be that this might be, what's needed for them. But why are we saying that this is a good move for the Phoenix Suns, Shaw?
Well, they're looking to try to do something different, really, first and foremost, and a guy who's done a pretty good job of developing players, in his other stops, along the way. And I think Phoenix is definitely in that. They have a lot of young talent that they need to develop. We've been talking about it for the last year or two now, whether or not they want to diversify some of that talent, package a couple guys, and maybe move them on to try to get some better players, maybe in the primes of their career. Nevertheless, I think he will be somebody who's going to have the patience that it's going to take to develop this team, to work with this team, work through their mistakes, and then see what rosters and what players really need to be here for the upcoming seasons and years. A big question coming up with Devin Booker. Again, they're gonna obviously they want to keep him. They want to put ink to pen and ink to paper and get everything done, but he's under no obligation really to go ahead and make it happen. If he might try to force his way out if things don't go in a proper way. So we'll see what happens. But I think this head coach, I'm just going to call him Igor for now. I think he's in a good position simply because there's not a lot of expectation other than to develop the young talent.
Damn it, I'm going to get his name right. Igor Kokoskov. All right.
There you go.
All right. So for Kokoskov, I'm probably not going to stop saying his name. Like, if I'm going to be saying it like 50 million times. We talk about Devin Booker, Shaw. This is a kid that averaged almost 25 points per game, almost 4.5 rebounds, and almost 5 assists per game. And by all accounts, you would say that that would be quiet, right? Because there was no noise being made. Like, everybody knows that Devin Booker is the best player on this basketball team. Everybody knows what his upside is, his potential can be. I just wonder, was this hire to benefit the overall development of the Phoenix Suns and Devin Booker within, or this is to help Devin Booker get to that next level while trying to assimilate a coach who knows how to work with guards and backcourts, and essentially put some nice pieces around what they've already established with Devin Booker?
Well, I think it's overall development, for this team. Booker is obviously a large part of what they want to do and how they hope to move forward within the league. But they have got to try to develop everybody all together so that Booker's going to want to stay, and that it is a team that he feels like, okay, has a chance to make some moves in the upcoming seasons. Again, no one has delusions of grandeur, and I don't think Booker does either, that, okay, next year, they're going to be fighting for a playoff spot or something like that. No, they'll probably be in the lottery again. But what do you do with, the Alex Lens of the world? Do you go ahead and let him walk? What do you do with Marquise Chris, and even Alan Williams, who they signed to a decent sized deal? And
can I be frank with you, Shaw? Because you posed that question. Do you let Alex Len walk? Hell yeah, you let Alex Len walk. You know what I'm saying? Like, let them cats stroll. You know what I'm saying? Give them a bus ticket. Destination wherever, just not back here again. The problem that I tend to see happen with certain organizations are they normally are. It's kind of hard for me to imagine that when you're drafting these guys, you draft them with a plan in mind. And yes, because you change a couple of people in your organization, or in the coaching tree or whatever the case may be, that it suddenly means that you've scrapped the plan and Alex Len is no longer the man, right? Like that's not always the case, man. Sometimes it just really comes down to, you're just not getting it. Like, I don't know if whether or not it means that you do or don't belong in the NBA, but it just means that you just don't belong with this organization. Like, whatever you're doing, your feel, your flow, whatever you're doing, it just doesn't fit with what we're trying to do, whether it be on the larger scale or on the smaller scale of things. And I tend to think that organizations that do themselves the most disservice is when they tend to latch on to guys because it's about the money, or it's because it's about the hurt, that they're going to get knowing that they drafted someone that is a bust. And sometimes pride takes over the better part of their judgment. And I just think that there are just some players, you know what? Maybe they can go and make themselves great. Eat that. You know what I'm saying? But you're talking about long-term success and people wanting to come see a good basketball team. It can't be at the expense of you still trying with guys that you certainly cannot be successful with.
Well, yeah, I don't know that Len is somebody that they're beating down his door on July 1 trying to get a deal done for sure. But the center position is a kind of one that's in flux. Do you think Chris is a true center? Do you think Dragan Bender can play that position? They also have a question with Tyson Chandler and his veteran leadership. They still want him. Do they still need him on this roster? 1 year left at 13.5. Is it worth it bringing him back, or do you try to move him on? The other big question on this team that, we haven't even gotten to is Alfred Payton. Restricted free agent. Orlando moved him so they wouldn't have to deal with it. Phoenix got a 25, 30 games look at him, so to speak. What do they feel like? Do they feel he's somebody who they're going to want to move forward with? He was injured to end the season, or maybe air quotes injured, because they were obviously tanking. But did he show them enough where, like, hey, they're going to want him on the roster to pair him alongside Booker? TJ Warren, nice young guy who's still developing at that small forward position, but you have Josh Jackson behind him as well, too. So young talent galore are permeating throughout this roster. Our guy Kokoskov has got a lot to deal with this, kind of figure it out. But, you feel like somebody or some bodies have to move because you just can't develop 8 guys at the same time.
I don't know if I necessarily agree that you can't develop 8 guys at the same time. I just feel like you can't develop 8 guys with no sense of purpose at the same time. Like, these guys need definitive roles, clearly, okay? Because if you really look at most of these guys that have been drafted, they've all been project pieces, right, Shaw? Like, they're not coming in with a load of talent and a resume of success even when they were coming out of college. Maybe with Alex Len. But obviously you've seen, and he's like the most veteran of this motley crew of young talent that we're talking about, right? Dragan Bender, he was a project. TJ Warren, he's practically a project. Josh Jackson, project, right? So there's a lot of projects that are going on. And unless these guys know coming in what you're asking them to be and what you're asking them to do, unlike what we see with what they did with the Philadelphia 76ers, or even what they did with the Milwaukee Bucks. I just feel like they really have to supplant their expectations about what they want these guys to do, and these guys have got to be committed in wanting to do it. And for the ones that don't, because they're young, move them along. Because now once you start seeing hints of talent, and then the murmurs are about these guys are talented, they're really good. Now all of a sudden the money starts creeping in, the contractual obligations start kicking in, and now you've cornered yourself where now you're saying, do I want to keep this guy because I have him on the cheap? Or do I want to unload this guy knowing that I can get something better for what I need for my team? And the Suns do an absolute horrible job of being able to manage both of those aspects of it, which then goes to your point, why it feels like that they're actually coaching up 8 different projects at the same time.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong there, but it's not going to be something that I think is a sustainable model, with the level of talent that they have on this roster. Like you're kind of saying as well too, you just don't know, okay, who's ready to take a next step forward? Who should they really be investing in? Chris has had his problems in terms of, has he come into camp in shape and is he motivated enough? And Dragan Bender, isn't the next Kristaps Porzingis. He hasn't shown that. He's more probably the next Andrea Bargnani at this point, than he is Porzingis or anything of the things of that nature. We've already talked about Len, and what he's going to bring to the table. And again, I think Peyton is a very, very viable question for what they want to do. Orlando gave up on him for many different reasons, but a lot of them saying, again, they didn't see enough improvement for him. So does Coach Kokoskov come in here now and put the right mindset in these guys? And then what does Ryan McDonough as a GM look at this roster? How does he evaluate it? Because again, it seems like it's going to be, you're just going to be running around in circles, and that's not going to make Devin Booker happy. There's no reason for that. I think a lot of people are going to be clamoring for Josh Jackson to just be put into the starting lineup this upcoming season, and trying to figure that out, whether he plays as a 2, whether he plays as a small ball 4, one way or another. I think they're going to want him to get the minutes because he showed more promise than any of the young guys outside of Booker that they have on this roster thus far.
I will say this much, Shaw, before we end off on this part of the segment. If there's an expectation that they're trying to figure this thing out, I think it starts with Tyson Chandler. I think there really has to be a concern, because you cannot tell me that the way to this team's progression is through the center position. Tyson Chandler, to me, works well when he has an alpha A type player next to him, like a Chris Paul or like a Jason Kidd. You can't expect this guy to be the only lone dude on this roster trying to get these young bucks to to put on their big boy pants on a night in, night out basis, to not go out there and embarrass themselves. I honestly feel like if there is any expectation of this team progressing, where we're seeing signs that they're on the uptick, Kokoskov is going to have to really figure this thing out from a backcourt perspective. So to your point, he really has to buy into whether or not Elfrid Payton is the guy. And if he is not, then you need to move getting a senior quality veteran point guard running that basketball team. Because there's no way that you're going to tell me that this team is going to get better through Tyson Chandler developing these guys and it suddenly being Devin Booker. I think Devin Booker is still a year or two away from having that kind of having that kind of an impact on a basketball team. But he's your primary scorer as well too. We've seen how long that it takes for like the James Hardens of the world for that type of thing to come around. You're going to have to do something at that point guard position if you're going to tell me that this team is going to show any signs of progression with so many young pieces as you were alluding to before.
Well, thing about Phoenix, we talk about every team we talk about, we need to at least look at their cap situation, and because they have so many young guys on this roster, because they've been in the lottery, et cetera, their cap space is excellent. Only $78 million in committed salary. Nobody who can opt in either way from the player side or from the team side. Alex Lennox said it will be coming off the contract, but then they got to figure out, as we alluded to, what they want to do with Payton. If they were to try to move Tyson Chandler, that's 13.5 potentially off their books, depending on where they go. And the elephant in the room as well too, Brandon Knight, still on this team, on the hook for $29 million. What's going to happen there as well too? Do they figure out something to get him, first of all, healthy again? And can he be a contributor? Do they just keep him and let Payton walk, as a result of just of their cap situation and trying to develop some young guys? So a lot can happen in Phoenix if they want to get creative or figure out a way to be creative and look at some of these guys and make some quick decisions of whether or not they want them to be a part of the future. But having a very nice cap situation at least allows them, at least for the next year, to try to develop all of them at the same time if they really wanted to.
You use the word creative, and we're talking about Ryan McDonough as the general manager, right? Those two things are synonymous. Yeah, exactly.
Everybody has his day. It can happen.
Fair enough, brother. Fair enough. We'll wait and see. In the meantime, 21 wins is obviously not going to cut it in the Western Conference, and essentially being the worst team in the Western Conference and among the worst in the NBA has only increased their probability of getting the top pick for this upcoming NBA draft. But it's still going to come down to what are they going to do with this roster moving forward. So let's go ahead, zip up and body up this Phoenix Suns team. Disappointing season yet again, but hopefully things will turn around once the NBA draft happens in a couple of months. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cali, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cali, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And this week on The Drop, playoff mentality. Really should be called Mamba mentality. Or LeBronto mentality. Or MJ mentality. However you want to slice it. They're just some players. They're just some teams that just know what to do when the playoff rolls around. Some, they go through years of heartache playing against their Achilles heel. And when they finally break through, you are almost certain that they're going to go on and win some form of an NBA championship. And we could look to a lot of examples. LeBron James in the when he was with the Cleveland Cavaliers, taking on the Boston Celtics, or LeBron James when he was with the Miami Heat taking on the Boston Celtics. Michael Jordan when he dealt with the Detroit Pistons, in his heyday. There's so many opportunities and so many times where we sit here and we say some of these guys have to figure out a way to turn it on. Okay. And there's some teams that we're seeing so far in this NBA playoffs that clearly exhibit a playoff mentality, which is exactly the reason why some of us, and maybe to most of the analysts, we've predicted them to make it to their essential finals, their respective finals. Then there's some that don't. So I'm gonna let you go ahead and catch on with this, Shaw. Like, what are we talking about when we talk about Mamba mentality, and who's exhibiting it so far in this NBA playoffs?
Yeah, well, I'm not a Kobe guy, so I'm not going to go with the Mamba mentality. But I think just in terms of understanding what the playoffs mean, and how to step up, what sparked my interest in this topic was just the overall sense of playoff X. You know what I mean? When it's playoff Rondo, we got playoff Al, we got playoff P, playoff Teague. All these guys, when the playoffs come, all of a sudden they're supposedly starting to play better. And I really wanted to look at, okay, well, who's actually doing that? Who's actually living up to that? And I'm going to actually, give a couple guys and throw them out there as well to you. But I want to know from your standpoint, who do you feel like is exhibiting the playoff X mentality? I think playoff Rondo is a true thing. I think he's proven that. Didn't have a great regular season, but is coming here now averaging almost nearly a triple-double for the playoffs. I think that's something that you have to pay attention to and understand, like, what? This guy really understands what it means to step up in the playoffs. Then you have young guys, like these rookies coming into the playoffs. Donovan Mitchell, balling out for Utah and leading his team into the second round. Jason Tatum, as we record, on the cusp of getting the Celtics to the Eastern Conference Finals, and somebody who I think was maybe not necessarily timid in round one, but was trying to pick his spots. Now, all of a sudden, tying Larry Bird for the first rookie, or passing Larry Bird as the only Celtics rookie to score 20 points in 5 straight games in the playoffs. These are the types of things that say, you know what? That dude is ready. He's ready to rock. So Rondo, Tatum, guys like that, Donovan Mitchell, playoff mentality truly exhibited in this first couple rounds of the playoffs.
Al Horford. I mean,
playoff was a real thing.
Yeah, listen, I was one of the first people that wasn't enamored with this deal that the Celtics made to bring him over. I felt that while this was a good signing, I felt like for a team that would be among one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, that his position would be considered as a liability because he's not big enough to play against most fives. And when you're dealing with a guy like Tristan Thompson, he's going to get eaten up. He's not athletic enough to deal with most fours, which if the Boston Celtics play the LeBron Jameses of the world, he cannot match up with those kind of dudes. And yet it's not even about Al Horford as much as it is about the relationship that Al Horford has with Brad Stevens, and how Brad Stevens, I feel like, has enabled Al Horford to be the quintessential Draymond Green of the Boston Celtics. He has found a way to make Al Horford a relevant player on the basketball court. He is doing things that I don't even think Al Horford was even doing when he was playing with as an Atlanta Hawk. So to me, when I look at a player like that, and to carry that into the playoffs, because we remember when the Celtics a year ago got into playoffs and had to deal with playing against the Cleveland Cavaliers, Al Horford was non-existent. And in a year's time frame, not having Kyrie Irving and not having Gordon Hayward, you see a different way that he has changed the way he's playing the game, and changed the way that he is talking to the guys around him, that is having an effect on them being a force so far in these first 2 rounds of the NBA playoffs. So Al Horford, definitely. Another person that I've also
of course.
Yeah, but another person that I also want to throw out there as we do our playoff P type thing. What about CP3, Chris Paul? Right, I feel like Chris Paul is a stabilizer. The Houston Rockets, we knew coming into the second round against the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz are going to put up a fight, but we felt more confident that James Harden and Chris Paul will be a more lethal combination for the playoffs than we had ever thought about James Harden paired with Dwight Howard or anybody else. And part of that reason is that the numbers don't always depict what CP3's contributions really mean to this Houston Rockets team. Like, his numbers are so deceptive, but yet they are so dangerous and they're so lethal. It's exactly why we keep saying the Houston Rockets actually do have an opportunity to knock off the Kings in the Western Conference, being it's the Golden State Warriors. And I just feel like those type of, we often talk about how Chris Paul, he falls short when it comes to him coming into the playoffs. And I think now that he's coupled with a dude that actually wants it maybe as bad as he does, he's giving himself really the best opportunity to allow his game to really speak more loudly than his dependency with what he has to be for everyone else on the team.
Well, yeah, those two, they needed each other, I think, in these playoffs, and
we still don't know if it's enough to beat the Golden State Warriors, but we can definitely say it looks a lot better with them two together than any other combination that we've seen so far, not in Houston or anyone else in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, you can say playoff misery loves company, and now those guys are trying to, reach their goals of conference finals, NBA finals, and ultimately NBA championship, and they have a legit shot. They really can and should be able to compete at the highest level and make a very competitive series. Dispatching Utah, of course, we're assuming that's probably going to happen. And then matching up with Golden State, in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think, anything can happen there. The Horford thing I just want to touch on really quick too. It's pseudo similar to Rondo, where regular season wise, they're kind of going along, and Horford obviously has played better in the regular season than Rondo has, especially in the last 2 years. But people are just kind of like, oh, they're not as good as they used to be. They're washed, blah, 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 blah. And then last 2 seasons, yes, and ironically, last year against each other, then Rondo got hurt after those first 2 games. Both guys, really delivering and stepping up for their teams and earning their proverbial checks, obviously more so in the case of Horford because his check is larger. And I think, you understand the value of somebody like Horford and what he does, for a team and in a roster. I think we'd probably be missing the boat if we don't at least mention LeBron James and what he's been able to do. And which I guess is going to
completely. I actually was thinking we were saving the best for last, right? So
yeah, no, because I guess it bleeds into a team / players who are not living up to that playoff mentality in Toronto. But LeBron, what he did to get his team out of the first round in 7 games against Indiana, nothing short of phenomenal. And what he's doing now is just dismantle the Toronto Raptors, is apocalyptic in many ways for that franchise, and having the city being renamed after him and Drake songs being renamed after him, Thanos references and everything like that. LeBron James in these playoffs in his 15th year, after having an historic year in the regular season, everyone wondering and marveling how he could do what he did in the regular season, now only to turn around in the playoffs, and is out here averaging almost 35 a game, 9.5 rebounds, almost 9 assists a game, 1.5 blocks, 1 block, 1.5 steals, 54% shooting. Yikes! Yikes!
But can I say something, Shaw? And I think everything that you said is 100% spot on. But I just want to say something. Is it just me? Because Cal can at times be cuckoo. But is it just me, or can we also label LeBron James as a coach killer, right? Like, and when I say that, I mean, we spent the whole year throwing accolades to Dwayne Casey, and the excellent work that he's done with this Toronto Raptors team. And we kept saying that, you know what? This is the year. This is it. There's no better opportunity for us to put it all together and really focus and hone our attention on how good this Toronto Raptors team can be, even if they don't go on and win the championship. No one is saying that anybody in the Eastern Conference is potentially winning a championship, whoever comes out of the West. But this series alone almost just nullifies and kills everything that we put Dwayne Casey on a pedestal for. It's not even a question of saying he's being outcoached. It's almost as if he's completely overthunk this whole series and has completely gotten away from the things that made the Toronto Raptors what we were saying as being the most dangerous team in the Eastern Conference and is deserving to be the number 1 seed and should be, playing in an Eastern Conference Finals or playing in an NBA Finals this year. Am I off in that kind of perception?
No, I don't think you're off. I mean, if you go back even to
in other words, Shaw, I almost want to make this feel like he reminds me of Woodson. Just good enough, but he'll never be great enough. And I hate thinking about that with a guy that worked so hard to get beyond that point when he was given those opportunities before as a head coach.
Well, I think here's where, and I don't want to get into it here in this conversation right now, but I got to touch on it for sakes of argument. This is where the Jordan LeBron comparisons kind of come into play. Because of Jordan, X amount of teams, X amount of coaches never got the opportunity to be champions or get to finals and things of that nature. Whether or not they would have actually won the chip one way or another, we don't know. But so many teams didn't even get there as a result of Jordan. And LeBron is that for the Eastern Conference more than anything else. I mean, what, 7, 8 straight years now? Like it's insane. And you're right. He's going to force guys out of town on all their rosters in the Eastern Conference simply because they just can't beat him specifically. And whether or not he goes on to win NBA championships, et cetera, that's irrelevant. He's killed the careers and the hopes and dreams of many Eastern Conference teams just by virtue of his greatness alone. So that's where I think it's very valid when you talk about a LeBron and Jordan comparison, because again, teams just can't get past him, and that's a bigger problem. Whether or not you have the playoff mentality or not, his is bigger, his is better, and he exudes it on the largest of scales, especially when it comes to Eastern Conference playing.
All right, I'm gonna add something to that point, Shaw, and then we could talk about the teams that clearly don't reflect that playoff mentality, right? Because we obviously that's what we also want to dig into is on the opposite side of this. But with that being said, the move that Dwayne Casey made in not playing DeMar DeRozan in the final minutes of that game, you mean to tell me that LeBron James is just that kind of guy that he forces coaches to do things that in my personal opinion, I'm not speaking for anyone else, any other analyst or any other pundit who's been watching this or whatsoever. You mean to tell me that LeBron James is the reason for an asinine move like what Dwayne Casey just basically did in that game, not allowing one of your superstars to be on that basketball court, win or lose, regardless of the circumstance, to have any kind of effect on the game, or to be there with his teammates in the final seconds watching the greatness of LeBron overshadow and once again, stick a dagger in the hearts of Toronto fans or anything. Like, he's sitting on the bench watching this. You mean to tell me that this is not going to have an effect on how DeMar DeRozan looks at Dwayne Casey moving forward, especially if this team gets swept or gets knocked out any other time?
Again, this isn't the exact same situation, but my point is Dwayne Casey has to know his guy. He knows that DeMar DeRozan, at least you have to feel like at that stage of the after playing in 3-4 years and going against LeBron, he knows what DeMar DeRozan is going to look like and what he's going to be able to do in that situation against LeBron James. He benched him for the last 14 minutes of the game because he didn't have it. He didn't believe DeRozan was going to give him anything. And it still took a miraculous LeBron floater at the end of the game to win it for them. They were playing better without him. Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry were kind of running it, and OG Anunoby running out there at the small forward position. Even Ibaka had a resurgence to some degree as well, too. It's ironic, and I say you never want to go down with the bullets in your gun, but DeRozan was a blank, and that's why he didn't load him in the gun for the Raptors to and deploy him out there. He knows his guy, and he didn't see that in his eye that he had that playoff mentality to go out there and get it done for him.
Well, listen, then it leads to this point about, what are we talking about with Toronto then, Shaw? Right? Like, I guess in my head, I look at other great coaches that are facing an adverse situation. I'm looking at other head coaches that had players who don't have that and have rolled the dice recognizing that they need to figure out a way to make them find their moment, whether they like it or not. And it's, to me, I think at times on the bigger stage, we do what's comfortable. And I want to say not what's right. What's right is win or lose, you are responsible for why DeMar DeRozan is considered like almost an MVP like caliber type basketball player right now for that Toronto Raptors team. Of all between him and Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan is the closest to getting an MVP, okay, over the next few years. Not Kyle Lowry. And I feel like you're robbing an opportunity for this guy to find that moment in himself just because you recognize that another loss or, yeah, you guys down by 17 at the end of the third quarter. Okay, I get it. But you've got to figure out a way to get them to find that this is not how it should be written, that this is not how it always is going to play itself out. Because even if on that lucky shot, Shaw, they don't get the shot, it's now overtime. You're just going to throw DeMar DeRozan back in there after you've already, put him out there to say, we were doing fine without you? Or you're going to say, well, we're going to keep you still on the bench because I feel like the only way that we're going to win this game is by having the combination of Van Fleet and Lowry. I just feel like this is going to have a much long-term effect for short-term admiration.
I understand the train of thought with it. I really and truly do. And I probably wouldn't have had the balls and as this dude, I'm going to want to go out there with my best player and find a way when they're making a run. You got to get him back out there because maybe he could do something for me. And that in this instance, Casey decided not to at the end of game 3. And whether or not it cost them, I don't even know if it matters right now because overall this Raptors team doesn't have what it takes. And it's sad to say, we all know and feel like they are a better team or should be a better team than Cleveland. But mentally, they are fractured when it comes to playing LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers at this stage, and they just can't get it done. And we're not going to see history made here in this series, or they'll miraculously come back and win it. Like, it's not going to happen. If they salvage one just for the sake of argument and get done out gentleman sweep style, fine, whatever. But you're going to have bigger questions with this roster moving forward, and something we'll think they're going to be very much so the next team we're doing an autopsy report.
Yeah, well, listen, it's ironic that we're talking about the Toronto Raptors at this length, and we should also be talking about the Philadelphia 76ers to some degree. But, we're going to give them a pass because their perennial superstars are two rookies, essentially, or young phenoms, right? But wasn't this team built around the idea that if their talent actually comes through, that they should be good enough to make the playoffs? And given the fact that the team that they're playing against doesn't have any of their superstar players except maybe their lottery draft picks and one max contract free agent player that they have on the roster, you would think that this Philadelphia 76ers team would not be, being ghosted like they are being by the Boston Celtics, and which makes you wonder, is it going to take one season of disappointment of not getting to the Eastern Conference Finals at the expense of this type of roster to say that the Celtics could possibly have the Philadelphia 76ers number? Let's keep in mind that this is one of the oldest rivalries in the NBA, and yet the Celtics, time and time again, have proven to be the better team, the better organization. I wonder if that's going to start lingering, as we start moving forward, regardless of what happens in this series with those guys.
Well, no, I don't think so. I don't think this Sixers team, and maybe not even the Celtics team as currently constructed, have that sense of history to even understand, what that has meant traditionally. I think the bigger thing, though, is, we can even go back a little bit. I mean, I know we got to, get to our next segment too, but we talk so much about the team or the players and their playoff mentality and capability. But you just brought up Dwayne Casey. And I think in a lot of ways what's happening in this Philadelphia series is a lot of stuff is being laid at the feet of Brett Brown and his inability to make the proper adjustments. That's a big part of what's going on in the playoffs as well, too. Do the coaches have what it takes mentally and strategically to get their team to that next level? Do you tinker enough? Do you pull the right strings and right moves? And right now, Brad Stevens in Boston, it has worked out. And you still wonder why. I mean, they're injured. They're banged up. They don't have two of their top 3 guys, that they were expecting to have at the beginning of the year. And now it's just next man up for real. And guys are just getting it done. It's insane. So I think Brett Brown is a guy, as a coach, although unironically he could win Coach of the Year this year, is exhibiting some tendencies that people are starting to question. Does he have enough what it takes to get this team to the next level? But you're right. It might just be a 1-year learning process, but you do kind of have to wonder, assume they do get bounced, and we're going to go ahead and make that assumption. Boston is going to come back stronger next year. So if you can't beat this Boston team, what are you going to do when they're 100 times better than, at least talent-wise, than they are right now?
I tell you, man, it is exactly why this was a great time for you to bring up this topic. Playoff mentality. I'm not going to have you say Mamba mentality, Shaw. I'll leave that to me. I'll say it. I'll say it with vigor. Mamba mentality. Who got that mentality? But right now, that's exactly what we're wondering with some of these teams that are participating in the NBA playoffs. And again, it's going to be interesting, the impact of what happens when some of these teams, if they can come back and win, or when they actually get ousted, how this will sting for these teams and their organizations and the fan bases moving forward. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right, Milwaukee Bucks. They are interviewing as many as 10 candidates for their head coaching position, including, and this is the first female NBA head coaching opportunity interview for San Antonio Spurs assistant coach Becky Hammon. What do we make about the Milwaukee Bucks also setting a tone for the tenor of the interviewing process for their NBA head coaching position?
I mean, great for them, really and truly. This is, like I've been saying, in my opinion, the most coveted job that is available right now in the NBA. Opportunity to coach Giannis, Chris Middleton, and those guys. You just feel like, this is a team that has so much potential and can reach another level. So it's not shocking that there's a lot of interest, and Milwaukee's taking it very seriously, interviewing a bunch of people. And, if they end up hiring Becky Hammon, great. If she's qualified, we'll certainly find out. But a lot of great candidates are going to be going through Milwaukee in these next coming days.
Yeah, and kudos to the Milwaukee Bucks. I think that they really are taking this process seriously. They've been amidst a little bit of controversies over the last couple of years with their hires for the head coaching position. And so hopefully they will do their due diligence and they will make the necessary hire for a very talented basketball team. Out in Detroit, there's some contemplation of shakeup in the front office. And obviously, it starts with the Van Gundy.
Yeah, man. Jeff Bauer, Van Gundy, everybody being evaluated. Not too sure what's going to happen in that situation right now. Signs are pointing toward Bauer as a general manager, potentially being ousted, and then figuring out what they want to do with Van Gundy, one way or the other, maybe just reduce him to strictly just coaching and not having anything to do with the front office. But changes are coming in Detroit. We'll see what that ends up looking like. But, I thought he would be the first one gone. He's still holding on, and it might actually return next year.
All right, now there's been that little moniker for Paul George when he came into the playoffs, Playoff P. Rumors are indicating now that he is definitely leaving or intending to leave Oklahoma City. Shaw, I hate to imagine what those signs might actually say, but that P definitely ain't going to stand for Paul if he does leave OKC. Boy, there's going to be a lot of P's, but it definitely won't be positive for those type of words we're thinking of, boy.
Yeah, that OPP is what it's gonna be.
You know what I'm saying? Oh, my goodness.
Damn shame. But, Playoff P will look like he's going to be taking his talents to another destination, most likely LA, as everybody is speculating, and has been the case for the last year and change when it comes to Paul George. So if that's where he wants to go, ultimately, fine, man. Go on, be happy, prosper. Good luck to you. See what happens. But I feel like there's other teams out there that he could actually be productive at. But that's not my decision to make, and it's his. And I think the Lakers are going to be very happy if he ends up coming over there.
Oh, I can't wait if that happens. OKC versus the Lakers. Oh, yeah, man. You talk about, Russell Westbrook will probably invite Kevin Durant for dinner the next day. And actually might buy him a front row seat. He's like, I want you to see what I do to this boy.
That'd be fun, though.
I cannot wait, man. I cannot wait. It definitely will solve that whole problem about Carmelo Anthony not being on the bench, right? So.
Well, so you think. You never know. Sam Presti had some interesting comments on his exit interviews too. So, I think if Melo opts in, then they may say, all right, you're opting in, we're benching you regardless. Now you're locked up. We can do what the hell we want to do with you. But we'll see what happens in OKC, man. Lots of changes on the horizon.
All right. Well, there you have it. All the news that's taking place so far. Another awesome show put together by my brother, Mr. Warren Shaw. And again, man, I like how we setting things off on the Twitterverse, man. When we catch certain things happening in the NBA, man, it's good stuff.
Yeah, man. We hustling always out on these Twitter streets, these NBA streets, and we encourage all the fans and listeners to reach out to us, especially on social media. We love the interaction, love to talk. The playoffs are live, so we're here watching the games and love to tweet back at you. Just have some stimulating conversation because we don't get to talk to you live here. You're listening to our show, but we always want your feedback. And don't forget, as always, you can give us a rating on iTunes, help us move up those rankings because we are, one of those hustling shows out here. Been doing it for a long time and hoping to continue to do it for a lot more years, brother.
Always, man. So once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for tuning in for The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw. We appreciate you guys. We do. Catch up with you next time.